All right, everybody. I'm sure today on My Thoughts from Doomertown with Bruce, I'm going to tick a lot of people off. I'm going to have to just take that risk, you know. And all I can say going in is that it's not what you think, you know. If you think I am anti-Jewish, anti-Israeli, anti-Zionist, whatever you want to think of me, that's not true in the slightest. Not true. You're reading it wrong. But I know I'm going to get a lot of this, so I'm willing to take the brunt of it because I have to say that, during the course of my life, uh, you know, I've seen not just the Hebrews, but I've seen numerous other peoples really get smacked out there in the world at one point or another, particularly during World War I and World War II. Yes, there was the Holocaust against the Jews, and nobody should ever deny that or try to forget it. But the Jews weren't the only groups that were virtually exterminated by the hands of the Nazis during that time. Now, what bothers me in all of this is there was a period back in time when a group of black Americans organized themselves and went over to a country in Africa they renamed Liberia. And they were going to go in there and they were going to remake Liberia as the model, black country of the world, of, for, and by blacks, and show people how it could be done. And, initially it started out okay, but as they went along, they realized, it's, a lot of this is much easier if I just kind of exploit and shackle the native Liberians. Because they don't really get it. They see a whole different future of what they want, and they have a hard time communicating because they don't have the education I have. All these excuses for why they just weren't up to task, And so you end up with a country that's being run with the new Liberians from America being the plantation owners and the native Liberians being the slaves. It was horrible. And you think to yourself, how could somebody, how could somebody who's been so abused, so mishandled, so, how do you put it? Shackled, put down, oppressed, whatever words you want to use, as the blacks have. How could you go into a country and almost without a whimper start doing to others what had been done to you? How could you do that and not realize you were doing it and not realize how wrong it was? Just boggles my mind. I mean, it is, it's like the Irish, right? Protestants and Catholics going at it. All over really, really issues that could have been easily resolved and did not require all that anger and bloodshed, But then we get to Israel, and most of the people I know, just, when I ask them about it, if it comes up, they respond to me with the typical American PR story of Israel, and I'm like, wow, okay. It's as if when somebody calls a Palestinian a refugee, they have no idea why that word is there. Refugee. What does that mean? An occupied territory. What does that mean? I mean, when the UN voted to split Palestine between Israel and Palestine, there were probably 600,000 native Palestinians that were non-Jewish. Right? Now all the Jewish Palestinians got to stay. They could stay, not a problem. But you see, and you're going to have to read about a lot of this if you want to learn, because I'm not going to try to go through the whole story for you. But you had the Zionist movement, which still exists today, which is a geopolitical movement within the ranks of the Jewish religion, right? And their thing was a homeland for Jews. Now, I will say at this point, before I go any further, that there is a contingency of the ultra-conservative Jews in the world who believe the state of Israel is wrong, should not exist, and should be torn down immediately. And if you want to understand that, you have to get into some Bible lessons to understand their interpretation of the, what do they call it, the Great Contract or something like that, between the Jews and God, made way back when. But they're the only ones in there. Most, the majority of Jews are all in favor of Israel, go for the goals, right? And you can't blame them, right? I mean, given what happened to them in World War II and all the years prior to that, to get your own state, absolutely, But the thing is, you see, Israel predicated itself as a Jewish state, right? So you couldn't let all the Palestinians stay and become citizens of Israel, because then they would outnumber the Jewish citizens of Israel, and they would control the state. And you couldn't have that. So you have to get rid of them. I mean, it makes sense, right? I mean, what choice do you have? Now, you had softliners who wanted to do it over time, using soft landings, lots of money, this sort of thing, all the way over to the hardliners who were basically, you got 24 hours, get on a bus, get what you can in your hands, get out of here. The hardliners won because they had equipped the Israelis, the Zionists, with enough military acumen and equipment that the poor little Palestinians were no match for them. I mean, the Palestinians had been under British control. They weren't allowed to have guns. They weren't allowed to have national representation in any sort of way, really. All they could have was like a local sheriff. So they weren't organized at all. They couldn't do anything. They were just blasted out of their homes. Just blasted. And I'm not telling you lies. You can go look it up. I'm not kidding you. Now, over the course of the next few days, atrocities were had on both sides, but the Palestinians were put on a long march across the border into what the United Nations had set aside to be the new Palestine. But, they weren't allowed to take their property, their money, their assets. So if you said, hey, I own a 40-acre farm, not anymore. It was brutal. I mean, their position was, We got to cut the nose off and cut it off now, stop the bleeding, and then go and deal with it later, right? So, did they need to do it that way? Of course not. They could have done it a much softer way, and it could have turned out to be much easier. But at the same point at this time, neither France, Britain, or the United States step in to stop the Israelis and say, back off. We need to walk this slow, and we're going to make you do things, because they were all so tired of the war, and now we're engaged in the Cold War, that they just didn't want to care. They looked at it and they said, look, Israel's got a little army, great. They're, a democracy, a theocracy really, but okay, we got a little democracy here. They'll work with us. Just pump money into them, keep them stable, help them with what you can, so they can keep all these other Arabs in check, and we can move on with other things. And that's pretty much what happened. So for decades, beyond that, the United States would cover Israel with a veto in the Security Council. You could get every other nation in the Security Council to want to punish Israel for its behavior towards the Palestinians, and the United States veto. Sad. It was really, truly sad to see. I mean, I grew up with a lot of Jewish families and friends, and I just couldn't believe that they would do that to another people, given what they had gone through themselves. That really and it still to this day, just staggers my mind how they can do that. Just like how can the Indians who are Buddhists do what they did to was it the Uyghurs? Whoever they, how do you do that? How can you freaking do that? It's horrible. I'm sorry if I'm not remembering things well. I'm declining, and unless I write these things down, I gotta rely that maybe I get it right, maybe I don't. So I have spoken out against the state of Israel on many occasions, and on work sites and whatever, and I've had people challenge me and get all huffy with me, but I've also found that if they take the time to sit down and talk to me about it, and I explain to them some of the history that they don't even know themselves, because nobody wants to teach them that, right? They don't want them to think about it that way. They want, the Israeli government wants all the Israelis to think of the Palestinians as these subhuman monsters who want to wipe them off the face of the earth. And that's just not true. It just isn't true. But each side over the years has taken positions that were no-goes, absolute no-goes. I mean, take Israel, for example. You have to recognize my right to exist. That's a pretty steep ask, right? I mean, if I agree that you can survive, you can exist as a nation, just because you all have the same religion, then who can I deny, right? All the people in Catalonia, in Spain, right around Barcelona, they could say, well, we're all Catalonians, so we want our own state of Catalonia right here. How could I say no? How could I say no to Hawaiians who say we want our Hawaiian Islands back? How do you say no to anybody? You can't go walking down those kind of slippery slopes just, with your eyes wide open. Yeah, okay, that sounds good to me. They knew what they were asking. They knew it was an impossible ask. An ask that the Palestinians could never make. Never, ever. And they haven't. What the Palestinians could say is, I accept the fact that Israel exists today. Not that you have a right to exist, but that you do exist. And that, I believe, they came very close to doing. But the Israelis, you know, repatriation. We want all the refugees and their descendants, allowed to go back, be given back their property and so forth. That's not going to happen. That's never going to happen. I don't care what you think. That's not going to happen. So you can forget that. Reparations, maybe. Israel ponying up some money to the Palestinians, absolutely. And creating a two-state system that can act peacefully and independently of each other. Yeah, I think that's possible. But it's going to take generations to do it, because you're going to have to work through a couple of generations to work out the anger and the angst that they're the bloody killers, And you see, these images of a Palestinian little rocket that has no aiming control at all. It just goes off. It lands in some parking lot. Next thing you know, you got a whole Israeli platoon with a couple of bulldozers, and they roll into where the rocket was, and they just bulldoze everybody's homes. Now, is that fair retaliation, really? Everything I've read in the military book says it isn't. And you have the Israelis constantly making settlements in the occupied territories, meaning lands that they didn't own and weren't given to them in the UN document. They took them as a spoil of war, and they're building, Israeli cities in them, towns, shopping centers, roads, whatever. That's not cool. You're trying to basically do to the Palestinians what the Nazis tried to do to you. You're trying to eradicate them. And that is wrong. In my book, it's just damn wrong, and it always will be. And I will never not say it is. Former President Jimmy Carter, in one of his last books, made the clear correlation to current Israel being just like apartheid in South Africa. And he was dead on. He was right on. I read the book. It was absolutely right. But oh boy, everybody got so upset. Oh, you cannot criticize Israel. Oh gosh, no. You cannot, because if you do that, you're an anti-Semite. And you're working against the Jewish community. Get off it. I hear Jews criticize the United States of America all day long. And they're citizens of this country. And do I tell them, hey, sharp it up, pal? You're an anti-American. Of course not. It's just sad, because it's just one of these things that show you how we still are the animals we always were, operating out and acting out today, and doing things that bring great amounts of hurt to so many people around the world, when it doesn't have to be that way. And just look at the Netanyahu riots that are going on now about the legal reforms, justice reforms over there. It's terribly, terribly sad. I hate to see it, but if I can do something ever to help the Palestinian cause, I do it. If I can help an Israeli peaceful cause, not a one against the Palestinians, I will help them as well. But I will never help the Israelis mount attacks of any kind, or engage in oppressions of any kind that really set back the future for the Palestinians, because I think that's just damn wrong. All right, that's me on that. I know I ticked a lot of people off probably, but what are you going to do? I got to speak my mind before I'm dead. I wanted to get that off there. So that's it. Peace and hang ten, everybody.